Do you think it's the deep state itself behind the assassination attempt? Because it could also come from the Republican camp, since many of them don't appreciate Trump, and maybe some would want to eliminate Trump to present another candidate to lead the Republicans.
In fact, there are factions of Republicans who support Trump. We saw this during his first term. During his first and only term so far, Trump had Democrats and Republicans against him. So when we talk about the deep state, we're not just talking about the Democratic Party. We're talking about a complex network system that blends converging interests: the military-industrial complex, multinational corporations, banks, the CIA, the Department of Defense, and, of course, the pro-Israel lobby. So this composite deep state has influential figures and controls Republicans and Democrats, including people around Trump. So there's not a separate Republican Party, and on the other side, Democrats exclusively representing the deep state. Other factors: Republicans don't really have an interest in eliminating Trump, because if they eliminate Trump, they're not sure they'll have a candidate capable of beating the Democrats. Trump is the Republican candidate because he's the most popular. But on the Democratic side, there's also a recent statement from Biden, starting to say that maybe he won't be able to beat Trump. And Obama said that maybe Biden should reconsider his position and withdraw from the race. So, on the Democratic side, there's also a Plan B. But Plan B has been prepared for a long time because for several years there has been talk of withdrawing Biden even during the campaign and replacing him, possibly with Michelle Obama. So in any case, from the Republican point of view, Donald Trump is the best positioned, and besides, he won the Republican primaries. So they have no interest in eliminating their candidate a few months before the election.
Facing Michelle Obama, who I remind you is a man. A bit like Brigitte Macron. Well, it's another debate. But there are theories about that. I think you're aware. It should be done like for the popes, where we feel the testicles before appointing him. So we'll check if it's a man or a woman who becomes president. Now, the second question is, what would motivate the deep state to liquidate Trump? There are different aspects. There is the international aspect. It is the conflict in Ukraine which has an existential dimension for the American deep state. So much so that it has committed itself to this enterprise and this adventurous aspect. We know very well that there is a whole mafia around Biden, notably his son, who are heavily involved in business, corruption in Ukraine. But there is also the presence of biological and bacteriological laboratories in Ukraine that were detected by the Russians. So Ukraine is a bit of a Pandora's box, which must not be opened definitively. And Trump had announced that he would end the conflict, and rather quickly. But there are also internal reasons that would lead the deep state to want to eliminate Trump. Lawsuits and investigations concerning the Clinton clan. So according to you, last week, when they tried to eliminate Trump, what were the most important reasons?
It's a complicated question, but if we take a step back and look at Trump's election in 2016, his campaign, the enemies he designated, and the internal war within the establishment during his entire term, but also the business that came out, because Trump during his term was attacked. They mounted files and affairs for impeachment, etc. But there were also affairs that came out during Trump's term against his enemies, which would not have come out without Trump. Because if the Democrats had been in power, you can imagine that we would not have had the Weinstein case, which was a friend of Hillary Clinton against Trump. I remind you in passing that Miramax, Weinstein's production company, was bought out in a buyout operation led by a billionaire friend of Trump, who is Lebanese. It happened somewhat silently, and it happened in the same sequence where Weinstein had his problems. Before Trump's election, I believe it was at the event of conservative Republicans towards the end of 2015, Trump was already on the launching pad with his candidacy for the presidential election too. He then spoke of Bill Clinton and Epstein, saying that Bill Clinton is a nice guy, but that he might have problems, especially regarding Epstein's island.
Bill Clinton.
Nice guy. Got a lot of problems coming up, in my opinion, with the famous island with Jeffrey Epstein. A lot of problems.
So it was already something that was being prepared. So there was the Epstein case that exploded during Trump's term, knowing that Trump was among the personalities who had testified and collaborated during Epstein's first trial, and he had been released. And there was pressure on the prosecutor, who also became the equivalent, I think, of the Minister of Justice in the Trump administration. Pressure on him by telling him that during the trial against Epstein, that Epstein is too big a fish for you, and that he is protected by American and foreign services, namely the Mossad, since Epstein worked for the Mossad. So in fact, during Trump's term, we saw a war where all means were allowed. On one side, the networks around Clinton, the deep state, and the establishment. And on the other hand, Donald Trump and his camp. So it was a war. Now, especially after the scandals that broke out during the war in Ukraine, namely the story of biolabs and the participation of Biden's son, if Trump returns in control, it could be that he continues this war against the Clinton and Biden clan. So I think this is already one of the main reasons why they tried to assassinate him. Another reason they want to prevent Trump's return is that Trump had run a rather isolationist campaign. That is, he pointed out the exorbitant spending for foreign wars that ruined the American state, especially the wars in the Middle East. When he came to power, he tried to initiate a troop withdrawal process, which had already been partially initiated by Obama from 2011, and Trump wanted to accelerate the process. Moreover, the withdrawal from Afghanistan, which took place in 2021 under the Biden administration, had been decided and signed by Donald Trump during his term. He had asked for the withdrawal of several thousand soldiers, and he got it. In fact, there was an internal war between the American military command and Trump. He wanted to withdraw as many troops as possible, see all the troops from Syria and Iraq, and the American military command refused, which had led to resignations from members of the senior American administration against Trump. And moreover, Trump accused Obama and Hillary Clinton of creating the Islamic State. He also, for example, closed a CIA antenna in Jordan, which had the function of coordinating, arming, and paying terrorist groups in Syria, notably in the Golan, on behalf of Israel. I have developed all this in my articles because many events have been overlooked by observers and which are still totally unknown to the general public,